Hi everyone. So this is obviously not my usual video as I don't normally talk about Australian politics on this channel, but in this case, I felt the need to make an exception and speak up. If you're in Australia, you may have heard of the Voice to Parliament referendum that is coming up on the 14th of October of this year. Voice to Parliament aims to amend the Australian Constitution to include a government parliamentary body for the First Nations of Australia, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, where they could have representatives in the parliament and government that can have the power to make laws in regards to issues related to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It would add an additional chapter in the Australian Constitution titled Chapter 9, Recognition of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Voice. The voice follows from the 2017 Uluru Statement from the Heart. Uluru, or Ayers Rock, is a massive sandstone situated in the Northern Territory of Australia that holds sacred and spiritual values to the Aboriginal people. The Uluru Statement from the Heart calls for real and practical changes to include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander recognition in the Australian Constitution, as it goes on to say. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish. They will walk in two worlds and their culture will be a gift to their country. Therefore, we call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. This idea was developed over decades by more than 250 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders, with more than 80% of the community supporting the voice. For my viewers outside of Australia who might not know much about Australian history, our treatment of the Aboriginal Indigenous people of Australia is similar to other countries like the US, Canada and New Zealand that have had similar histories with invasion of the land and spreading various diseases, mass genocides, stolen land, stolen generation, forced assimilation. Even to this day, Aboriginal Australians have a lower life expectancy compared to non-Indigenous Australians. They are twice as likely to commit suicide and have the worst health outcome out of every population. I mean, it wasn't even until 1967 that they were even counted for the census, despite living on this land for over 65,000 years, making it the oldest surviving culture and tradition in the world. So when I first learned about this, to me, this was such a no-brainer. Like, duh. Yes, of course, yes. Why are we still even discussing this? I mean, it's about time, isn't it? Not to mention that these people aren't even asking for reparations, it's merely recognition, for you to simply acknowledge that they exist. And this seems to be the consensus where I live, as taking a walk around my neighborhood, there are already some houses and businesses that have put up posters taking the stance that they're voting yes, which was lovely to see, but there is always a but, isn't there? But the thing about Australian government is that it is so neoliberal, very centrist, centre-right even. I would go as far as to say very much listening to both sides, because there is bad people on both sides even when there is an obvious right or wrong. Even though currently we're under the Labour government, the Australian government still put out a pamphlet where they listed off reasons to vote either yes or no side by side. The pamphlet includes 10 reasons to vote no, which is what I want to go over in this video. Like I said, I'm not going to go over the reasons to vote yes, because to me, it is obvious. Unlike some of you, I believe in a thing that you may have forgotten about called freedom, and somebody's right to exist and to be recognized and acknowledged as a community should not be up for debate. As I'm going through the list of all these reasons, I would like for you to keep in mind that this is an actual official document that was put out by the Australian government. So the fact that the government is even entertaining and platforming these ideas and straight up misinformation is nuts. Number 1. This voice is legally risky. It goes on to say how the Australian Constitution hasn't been changed since 1977, and making this change could be risky. As I directly quote from the pamphlet, it is a leap into the unknown. There is no comparable constitutional body like this anywhere in the world. Except there is. The United States Constitution, for example, mentions the Native American tribes 3 times. The Canadian Constitution recognizes and affirms the existence of indigenous population. Even our neighboring country, New Zealand, affirms the existence of Maori people by ensuring they always have a seat in the parliament. What I find strange about this point is that they never elaborate as to how this change will be risky. They go on to say legal experts don't agree and can't know for sure, and this will open a legal can of worms, but they conveniently fail to mention how or who are these legal experts that don't agree and why don't they agree, which makes it difficult to argue with this point any further. Number 2, there are no details. We don't know how it will help disadvantaged communities and close the gap. We don't know how many members this voice would have. We don't know if they would be elected or chosen or how this would occur. We don't know how it would make representations or be held accountable. Again, there are details. In fact, the yes section of the pamphlet literally answers some of these questions. The idea for a voice came directly from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It would help disadvantaged communities by actually listening to them. The representatives of the voice followed from the Uluru Statement, where over 250 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders were nominated by their communities. But they just pretend that these details don't exist and just run with their point, further going on to say, you wouldn't buy a house without inspecting it or a car without test driving it, which is not a fair analogy, is it? But say even if we do go by this analogy, at this stage, you're not even letting us test this metaphorical car or inspect this metaphorical house, while other countries like the US, Canada, and New Zealand are definitely not perfect when it comes to their treatment of their indigenous populations. At the very least, they have taken steps to recognize and acknowledge these people. I mean, I could say the same thing. If you don't know much about this car or house, why are you so insistent on it being a bad thing, especially when other countries have already handed out their cars and houses decades ago and are doing just fine. Number 3, it divides us. Enshrining in our constitution a body for only one group of Australians means permanently dividing Australians. This is the textbook definition of colorblind racism. Dismissing racism, saying stuff like, I don't see color, there is only one race, human race. Speaking about inequality will only divide us. But all it does is ignore and dismiss systemic racism because there already is division, right? Like I mentioned earlier, Aboriginal Australians have a lower life expectancy compared to non-Indigenous Australians. They are twice as likely to commit suicide and have the worst health outcome out of every population. During the Black Lives Matter protest of 2020, it was brought to light that since 1991, over 437 Indigenous people have died under police custody. Yes, police brutality is a huge issue here in Australia too, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are one of its major victims to this day. So yeah, saying stuff like this ignores the reality that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are forced to live in, which is that there already is division. Now the best that we can do is acknowledge it and take steps towards reparations to move forward. Number 4, it won't help Indigenous Australians. Yeah, nah. If it really wouldn't help the Indigenous Australians, more than 80% of them wouldn't support it. Next, number 5, no issue is beyond its scope. This voice model isn't just to the parliament, it goes much further to all areas of executive government. That includes all government departments, agencies, and other bodies like the Reserve Bank. Decisions in relation to the economy, national security, infrastructure, health, education, and more would all be within its scope. And why is that a problem? I mean, Aboriginal Australians live in Australia. Therefore, they could be directly affected by the decisions made about the country's economy, national security, infrastructure, health, education. Shouldn't they have a say as to how they would be affected? Again, it brings up the many legal experts who have expressed concerns without going into who exactly are these legal experts and what are their concerns. Number 6. it risks delays and dysfunction. Following on from the last point, because the scope of the voice goes through all branches of the government, it would add an extra step of going through the piece of legislation with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders before passing, which can create delays if it's not something that they're satisfied with. Now, for once, this is something that I agree with. I don't want delays and dysfunction when it comes to the government passing legislations. However, I also don't want the government rushing when it comes to passing legislations. I don't know about you, but for me, I would much prefer if they take as much time as they need, go through all the points, listen to as many people as they can, especially if it's something that impacts the Indigenous community. And given that the voice would make sure that the Indigenous community would be listened to me, if that creates a bit of delay, so be it. It's worth it. They further go on to say, the risk of legal appeals and delays means a risk of dysfunctional government. That is not good for Australia. No, I'll tell you what's not good for Australia, which is delaying the path to the right to Indigenous recognition and acknowledgement when several other countries have already done so decades ago. The fact that we're still even discussing and questioning this is not good for Australia. Number 7. It opens the door for activists. The legal uncertainty and the absence of details raises the question, what comes next? Some voice supporters are upfront in saying this voice will be a first step to reparations and compensation and other radical changes. Again, I don't understand why that is a problem, unless you're outright against Indigenous rights and believe that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people don't deserve reparations. I don't see why this would be a bad thing. Number 8. It would be costly and bureaucratic. This specific point is directly counteracted in the yes section with point number 5, save money. When governments listen to people, they get better outcomes and use funding more effectively. Governments from both sides have invested billions in programs that haven't fixed problems or reached communities. A voice will help us listen to locals and save money. We're all better off when governments don't waste taxpayer money on things that aren't working. I've previously mentioned how Aboriginal Australians have the worst health outcome out of every population. Due to this, between 2019 to 2020, the average health expenditure per person for Indigenous Australians was 1.5 times as high as for non-Indigenous Australians. But letting Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders have a voice to their own issues, directly listening to them as to how they can improve their own health, likely through getting to the root cause of these issues, could end up saving a lot of money. And that is just one example. Say with climate change, the Australian bushfires of late 2019 to early 2020 were aggravated by climate change, costing anywhere between $78 to $88 billion. Aboriginal Australians have been living on this land for thousands of years. They have a spiritual connection to this land. They know how to live harmoniously and sustainably with this land without causing such catastrophes, which could potentially save millions of dollars. So yeah, while things like polling, voting, referendums can cost some money, in the long run, letting Aboriginal Australians have a voice could save a lot more money. Number 9. This voice will be permanent. Again, what is the issue with having permanent Aboriginal representations in Parliament? Would you rather have there be temporary representations? Why? Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have always existed. It is the oldest surviving culture in the world. It goes on to say how this voice is not a trial or pilot program. It will not be in legislation that can be reversed. Once it is in the Constitution, it won't be undone. Once the High Court makes an interpretation, Parliament can't overrule it. We will be stuck with the negative consequences forever. Again, what negative consequences? They have yet to give an example of these so-called negative consequences or risks or concerns that they have been going on about. Last but definitely not least, number 10. There are better ways forward. But surprise, they never actually state what better alternative ways that they would prefer. I mean, they did say that they would prefer a less risky option without specifying what that would look like or what exactly the risks are. When previous changes to the Constitution have been proposed, there has been a constitutional convention to properly consider options and details. No such process happened here. this process was rushed and heavy-handed. No, it wasn't. Like I mentioned at the start, this idea for a voice was developed over decades by more than 250 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander leaders nominated by their communities through the Uluru Statement from the Heart in 2017. When I read through the reasons to vote yes versus the reasons to vote no side by side on that pamphlet, aside from the different rhetoric, the style of the rhetoric becomes apparent. The yes section, which even though I didn't go over in this video, comes off as very level-headed and objective. They cite facts and statistics. When quoting legal experts, they actually cite who these legal experts are by listing their credentials. In contrast, the no section comes off as angrier and more defensive in tone. And this is emblematic of the energy that I've seen online in regards to the vote no crowd. Almost all of the things that I've seen online regarding this referendum are in favor of voting no, and they all come off as angry and defensive and fear-mongering, very emotive response. But when you actually ask them why they're against this, they don't seem to specify other than some vague concerns or risks or negative consequences. And of course, almost all of them follow Pauline Hanson.
You got me. The only Aboriginal who cares about the voice or is voting yes. Here I am, all alone, with my cat, black and white, reconciliation. One of my favourite habits now and favourite pastimes is looking at comments like this and finding out a little bit about the people, because you just know who they follow. And there's a common person that all of these comments follow. Follow me. Let's have a look. I guarantee it. So here she is. Great photo, Nini Schmacko. Right, let's have a look at some of the followers. Let's see how long it takes me to... there she is. Auntie Pauline.
Pauline Hanson, for my non-Australian viewers, is the senator for the Australian far-right party One Nation. She is so hateful and bigoted that it has become a meme among Australians. She is particularly known for her strong stance against immigration. She is anti-immigrants of any kind, legal or not. In particular about Muslims, she has called for a Muslim ban. She has said Islam is a disease that needs to be vaccinated.
Islam is a disease. We need to vaccinate ourselves against that.
She has pulled a stunt where she showed up in Parliament House wearing a burqa to mock Muslim women, and she is against Aboriginal Australians. Even though they are not immigrants, they have been here longer than any of us have. But I think it's pretty telling that, from what I've seen at least, the people that are voting yes are more open and vocal about it, to the point they even hang up posters outside their houses displaying their stance. Whereas the people that are voting no, that are against this, seem to retreat in their safe spaces online, hiding behind anonymity, harassing Aboriginal creators or anyone who supports the voice. Oh, I can already feel the kind of comments coming on this video. And I don't think it's because of some Orwellian nightmare where freedom of speech is stifled and there is a silent majority. No, none of that. It's because the real reason why you're voting no is because of racism. Plain and simple. And racism is shameful, and I would even go as far as to say that it should be shamed, which is why the arguments made in the pamphlet for voting no are so poor. The reason you're not delving into what these negative consequences or risks or concerns might be is because there is no way for you to do so without sounding racist. What you're really doing is looking for ways to justify racism and counting on people's ignorance on the topic. The case for no in the pamphlet ends with, if you don't know, vote no. Which, no. If you don't know enough about this topic, you need to do your research. It took me 2 minutes to look up what all of this was about. So yeah, that's all I've got for today. Apologies if this video felt a bit rushed and not as researched as some of my other videos, but I really wanted to get this out before 14th of October. If you're an Australian citizen aged 18 or over, go out and vote. Look up polling places near you. Voting is compulsory in Australia. If you're in a remote area, voting for you starts on 25th of September. Early voting starts on 2nd of October. That is when I'm going to vote because I have work on the 14th and I can't leave work to vote. And look, I'm not here to tell you what to vote, but at this point, I don't really see any reason to vote no aside from racism. I am so done with this country.